we've been going to a lot of shows. All right.
Yes.
So what was your first concert that you ever went to? Not necessarily like in the roots music genre,
Right.
but like just the first one you ever went to.
So I'm not 100% sure because when I was young, my mom and my stepdad would take me to like Renfro Valley and other places where various musicians were playing. I remember the earliest memories I have, other than what I've already talked about, going to the friends' houses on Friday nights. I remember we went to see a folk musician named Cy Khan, who I would love to track down and have on this show, by the way. He's got some really good songs. I think I still have some of my mom's old vinyl Cy Khan albums.
The name sounds familiar.
Yeah. So, and I think he was a notable folk artist in the 80s, probably.
Okay.
But anyway, so I know we went to see him. I'm not sure how old I was. I know I saw John Prine probably 3 or 4 times before I turned 10 or 11 years old, because amazing. He was one of my mom and stepdad's favorite. The first concert I remember, like clearly remember, I'm going to a concert. I'm somewhat proud of, but somewhat ashamed of. It was Hank Williams Jr. And I only say I'm somewhat ashamed of it because in retrospect, looking at Hank Williams Jr. in probably this would have been 1982, maybe. I was 9 or 10 years old when I went to this thing. It was rebel flags and, you know, if the South would have won, we'd have had it made that was a very different era. And I was young and dumb and didn't know any better. And looking back now, it's like, man, he should have been canceled. I think he's evolved and he's changed, you know, and matured over the years. A lot of, I'm not trying to pick on him or anything, but it was a very different era. And looking back on it, I'm like, ugh, kind of cringe that was one of my first concerts. But
like you said, that was a long time ago and you were so young. Did you really have a say?
Not really. I mean, I remember I wanted to go because my stepdad had a bunch of his albums and like he was a very popular performer at the time. And so,
of course, and when you're that young, you don't know any different.
That's true. I will tell you that this is one thing that's really cool about that experience. And if I remember to do this, I'll pull this out at some point. My mom and stepdad, my mother was the editor of the local paper in Pikeville, Kentucky when I was that age. My stepdad was like the production manager or something. So that's kind of where they met. Okay. So she had a 35 millimeter. Back then they were just black and white 35 millimeter cameras, or the black film was black and white anyway, because she would take pictures for the newspaper. I had the camera and I think my stepdad put me up on his shoulders. We were in like the 7th or 8th row or something like that. Okay. And I took pictures with this 35 millimeter camera. I have a really good black and white picture of Hank Williams Jr. playing.
Oh, no kidding.
That I took. It was one of the first pictures that I took that was in focus, probably. But I have that in a scrapbook somewhere.
Oh, that's neat.
So I don't have any pictures of me, which makes sense. Like nowadays, I would have done selfies all night. But
oh my gosh.
But back then, I took a picture of Hank Williams Jr. playing. The one thing I remember about that concert was his fiddle player looked a lot like me, had a big beard, was obviously wearing a cowboy hat. And when he was playing or when he wasn't playing, he was like, had this evil grin on his face, like the whole time. He freaked me out a little bit. So that was my first concert.
All right.
What was your first concert?
Oh, well, you want to talk about cringe?
Uh-oh.
Actually, no, it's not. Okay, so my first concert, I was like 5. And the only reason I went to the show was, and I know I've mentioned this before, but my father was a Chicago cop. Okay. And like all cops do, they have side jobs. Okay. Right. And so for many years, my father's side job, one of his side jobs was with Jam Productions. So he would work like security at, as he called them, rock concerts. Okay. And so he was working a rock concert, and the performer was none other than my first love, Andy Gibb. So true story. So my dad got me and my mom in, and so that I could see Andy Gibb in concert.
Wow.
And I have like I have some memories from it, like I remember him being on stage. Like we weren't really close up, but I remember like we were back a little bit enough where like the like stadium seating, right? Like I was
Yep.
looking down at the stage a little bit, and didn't have a shirt on, tight blue jeans. And what I probably just was like so oblivious, I was just happy to be hearing the music and seeing him there. And then what, like 9 years later, he's dead. And
Yeah.
I like my world was shattered. I
Yeah.
mean, I hadn't listened to his music, but just like, the memories that I had, especially that concert and just hearing his music. Fun fact, side note, when I was in second grade, you remember the old school like metal, the lunch boxes?
Yep.
And then it had like, the popular cartoons and whatever, the
Mm-hmm.
characters on the lunchbox with the little matching thermos. Um, my lunchbox in second grade was the Bee Gees.
Oh wow. So
I
you
had
were
a,
you were in deep with the Bee Gees.
I was, and
The
well,
Gibbs.
the
Yeah.
Gibbs. Um, Yep, second grade, I had a Bee
Nice.
Gees lunchbox, and, yeah, so that was my first concert. I mean, my first, like, real concert when my dad didn't have to get me in and I didn't go with a parent, when I was 13. So, my
Okay.
father, because he had that side job, he didn't allow me to go to rock concerts because they smoked dope,
Of course.
and those were his words,
Uh-huh.
and, so it's whatever, 1986?
Yeah.
1986 was it? And U2 released the Joshua Tree.
Oh wow, you went to you too.
I
Holy
went to
moly.
U2. My godmother, the show was sold out, but where I'm from, everybody's got a guy. So my godmother was able to get me 2 tickets to the show. So I went with a friend of mine, and my mom and my godmother drove us to the stadium and picked us up and stuff. It was a school night,
Uh-oh.
and my father was pissed. He was so mad. He didn't talk to me like the next day or probably the day after too. He was so mad. Um, but whatever. I got to go see U2. That was like my first real concert, and it
That's
was,
a hell of a feather in your cap to see you
yeah,
two that early in your Joshua Tree era. That's
yeah.
that's
Well, and
good.
then
That's big.